with you again.
Hi. Happy summer.
Yeah,
Right,
summer
summer
is
over
here.
here.
Well, summer is there for you. It's not quite here for us here in the UK yet, but getting there. It's warmer some days and some days are nicer. And I'm not like in 20 layers. I can wear maybe one or two. But yeah, what's the weather like in Colorado where you are?
Colorado, it is scorching here, and it's not even like high summer yet. I think high summer is around August.
Hmm.
Yeah, we've had really, really warm days, and it's been actually raining a lot this year. So it's been nice. Some days it's like really hot, and then it kind of cools down because of the rain. But otherwise, yeah, it's like full on summer. And of course, we're like really high elevation, so I need to only be out in like 15 minutes, and I got my farmer's
I can
tan
see you've got this tan.
from
Wow.
outside doing gardening, and I'm like out there pulling weeds, and I'm like, oh, and I've got like yeah, totally different color. So.
Wow. Oh my gosh. I cannot imagine those days of just stepping out and getting such a tan. No, no, no such luck here in the UK.
UK,
But
yeah, you have to like there's like one day of sun, it's like, oh. My
yes, yeah.
husband has a story of when they went to England with the kids, and they were like on the beach or some English beach or something. It was like really windy, and the kids were all in like windbreakers and stuff. And there was like this little British boy skipping along the beach in his shorts and t-shirt, and he's like, "Is it a lovely summer day, mummy?" And she's like, "Yes, it is, darling." And the kids were like, "What?" All around them, they're just like freezing cold. It's like I don't know, in the 20 in yeah, 20-degree weather in Celsius, I think.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. As soon as it goes to, I think around, what is it like 13, 14? See all these people with their tops off and just kind of like sunbathing in the streets or, it just looks very odd if you're not from here. But if you are from here, then pretty much whatever opportunity you get, it's spaghetti straps, sandals, shorts, slipper thongs, not underwear thongs. But yeah. Um,
English summer. Yeah. No, I'm
yes.
definitely a sun kind of girl, so it is very intense here, but I do like it. Summer.
Yeah. Okay, so today for our, I think today's the fifth episode that we're doing. We are going to do more of an interview style. So I'm going to interview Victoria, and the topic today is you can kind of one way of putting it is calling, or another way of putting it is purpose. So kind of our reason for being. What do we feel called to do? What is the story behind that calling? And then kind of what are we doing now in life? What is the work that we're doing? What are we passionate about? And what are the ways that we love to serve others? So that's kind of the overarching topic for today. So today I'm going to be asking Victoria some questions about her work and what she's done. So, okay, I'm going to delve right in. I do have some questions here. Okay, so question one. Could you give us a snapshot of what you have done job or career-wise in the past, and then right now in your life? So maybe if you kind of take us through what you were doing before and then where you're at now.
Yeah. So I think we talked about on some of the other podcasts how we basically started working from a really young age to help support our family, our big family of 7 kids, and so probably from the time I was 11. Obviously we come from a big family and we were all homeschooled. So working with kids, mom and dad would be taking care of the younger kids, or eventually when we moved to China and they would be out working during the week, me and you were responsible for schooling our younger brothers and sisters and looking after them, doing the cooking, basically becoming little parents ourselves. And so, yeah, we were working with kids from basically the time we were kids. And then we also started to work outside the home as English tutors, and we taught at Kumon, which actually I thought it was just a Chinese Hong Kong thing, but they have Kumon over here in the US as well. So
Yeah, it's
people probably
international.
know it's like an after school enrichment kind of sort of math and language, like ELA after school intensive program. So me and you were teaching that. I was 11, you were 13, or maybe I was 12. I can't remember. Oh, 11 because we were in Hong
Yeah, it
Kong.
was 11 and 13. Yeah,
11 and
we were
13. Yeah.
quite young.
We were kids ourselves. I mean, yeah. So we were doing English tutoring. Um, and then when we moved to China, we also started English tutoring because I think being in Asia, everyone wants to learn English. Parents are quite happy to hire you privately to teach their kids. We already had teaching experience from a very young age, and also modeling and getting into advertisements and performing. So we had kind of this very well-rounded, um, we did English teaching to raise money, and then we did modeling to raise money more on the entertainment side of things. And then also we had our own little show troupe. So singing, dancing, performing, all of that. And that was throughout our teens. And then um, when I was about 17, 18, then I started, working full time because I moved out of our parents' home and started working for myself to raise, rent and be an adult basically. I also started teaching in kindergarten because we had all that teaching experience. So I was teaching part-time in kindergarten while also was still studying. And then I moved from teaching part-time to actually teaching full-time. And so I taught at a bunch, if anyone knows kind of like the expat lifestyle, there's always like international schools. So a big expat, so foreign, the children of expats population, but also kind of slightly richer families whose kids eventually do go on to go to university in Australia or Canada. And so a big like Chinese student population. And so I taught kindergarten, mostly kindergarten, preschool. They start from a very young age in China. So I was teaching like the 4 to 5 year olds mainly. And then I also started teaching enrichment classes. So this is where I started teaching cooking, dance, music, art, all of those things, storytelling, drama. Um, and so I worked at a number throughout my 20s, worked at a number of different international schools. Some had like a Korean population, so I taught at a Korean school for 2 years. I taught at a early learning center, which my focus was teaching cooking to kids who were like 3 to 6 years old. That was so fun. I loved that so much. Um, and music, dance, art, all of those kind of extracurricular. And when I had my second son, Harry, I had to take maternity leave. Well, I chose to take maternity leave. And, me being kind of like, I don't want to stay at home. I kind of want to get out and work again. I realized that a lot of Asian moms didn't have a lot of knowledge on how to um, interact with their babies. I had a lot of Chinese mom friends, and they were like, "What do I do with my baby? Like, if I don't have the what IE or the nanny kind of take care of them, I don't know how to interact with them." And so I thought, hey, this is an opportunity. I had already learned infant massage and infant signing with my own for my own kids, and so I decided to teach them to Chinese moms. And so I ran my own developmental classes for about 6 months. I taught baby massage, infant sign language, and just kind of education for parents on what to expect the different ages and stages of their baby. So they didn't think my baby's behind because they're not crawling yet, and kind of educating the parents while interacting with the babies. And then I also taught mommy and me and Jimboree
Mhm.
classes for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I was doing that, I was also getting Montessori training and RIE. Yeah, kind of. I've always, in the opportunities I've gotten, I've always like, oh, I can learn. Like, there are probably new aspects of this to learn that I'm not sure about yet, or I don't know a lot about yet. So I've always kind of let my experiences lead what I'm learning about next, and that's normally led on to other opportunities. So
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of been my background. Or I'd say early childhood education has been my really main focus in my 20s. And then as I as my kids got older, obviously I started learning about older kids. And I taught uh, I was a substitute teacher from K to 8th grade, also in an international school. And that's kind of when I learned like, oh, there's a huge range of different needs and ages and stages of kids. So yeah, that was in China what I was doing. And then when I moved to the US, we talk a little bit more about purpose. And that's where my purpose changed from purely educating like 3 Rs and all that kind of basic stuff, and a little bit of developmental and extracurricular to mental health development. And that's kind of when I moved to the US, my focus really became that.
Hmm. So very much to do with, well, early learning, like you said, that was a big part of it, from having your own kids and then seeing other moms and noticing what their needs were. Kind of like you would see what the need was. You would be in a certain situation or position where you could expand your learning, your knowledge, and your skill set. And then you would kind of take that, and then also there would be opportunities for you to use that in your work or to create classes that were, needed for the community. That's incredible.
I,
I love that.
I worked a
And
lot on curriculum development as well
mm,
for schools because I was bringing in these kind of newer ideas that
mhm,
Chinese education was quite old fashioned in a way.
mhm,
And a lot of parents, young parents who had a lot of money, were like, we're seeing things in the West, like, like respectful parenting and child led behavior. Montessori was a huge thing. That's why I got Montessori training, because I saw a lot of parents were interested in that style of training, letting the child lead, and not everything was so structured. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna study this, and I'm gonna take this knowledge and help expand and offer that to parents so they can understand, like, oh, this is what it's like, because there weren't a lot of schools doing that. So I would also go into schools and offer them and say, hey, I've got this, training, this knowledge, this education, this experience. Do you want me to come in and help create a program for your learning center? And a lot of them hired me. So
mhm.
yeah, I had a lot of experience with that as well. And that was really fun.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. And I guess for your boys, they were like maybe the inspiration or the starting point for a lot of your things. Like you mentioned the baby massage. I remember Harry, you were doing baby massage with him when he was about 3 months, 2 months or 3 months. And you were saying that it really helped to like calm him down and just like mellow him. And you would notice the difference between the babies that were getting the baby massages and then the babies who weren't. And yeah, that's incredible how you could take all of, like a very holistic program and to see what the needs were and then kind of put that together in your curriculum development.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. All right, so the next question was kind of, yes. So what was it that led you to make the transition from what you were doing before to what you're doing now?
Mm. Yeah, so that was kind of a personal, it started off as a personal journey.
Mm,
I Even though one of the things I studied in my 20s was child psychology, um, I didn't really take the same kind of approach that a lot of parents take. They're like, well, school's important, and like my child's physical development is important. Like mental health, like, man, like, why? Right? I didn't understand the importance of mental health. And I guess, the world was also a little bit different pre-COVID. Um, but it was really during COVID time, and end of 2019, 2020 was when it really hit over here. And I had moved to the US at the beginning of 2019. I was kind of working with my own family and trying to settle and get my son settled and work in my new blended family and kind of restart my life over here. And I wasn't really thinking of career or anything like that. But it was during 2020, COVID hit, everyone just kind of went into isolation. And I was, looking online, I was studying. This is when I started to realize that, I'm struggling within my family. I know about children and I'm kind of understanding parenting. Part of my story is I struggled in my different parenting styles with my own kids and building connection with them. And so I was healing that, on the process of healing that, and understanding, like, okay, there are different ways to do things, different styles of parenting. But it was really when I came here and I became a stepmom, and I was like, step parenting is like
mm,
so different. All the things that seem to work as a parent don't work as a step parent. It's just like the rules, the expectations, the communication you have with them. It's just like, it's so different. What am I doing? And so I was already struggling with my own two kids, one of whom was, living in England, estranged. One was living with me, but obviously all the upheaval of moving, going through a lot of challenging times in his own life. And I'm trying to support him with that. But then on the other hand, I've got three step kids, one of whom is adopted step kid and living with us, but also not living with us. It was just like complete upheaval. Now I remember having a conversation with mom and I was like, what am I doing? I was like crying. What am I doing? I didn't know what I'm doing. And she was talking with me and just like kind of, like empathizing with me, just like, yeah, it's really tough. And obviously, we have a stepdad as well. So I guess she was a mom in a situation with a blended family as well. So I think she was empathizing with me, like, yeah, I know it's tough. And then thinking that there's got to be something online. Like, I know I could hire a therapist, but it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars for all of our family to get individual therapy or whatever they need. There's got to be, like, I've got a background in child psychology and education and all the teaching. I can do this. And so I was like, there's got to be something online that I can find and learn, right? Everything was all like, I can learn this, I can do this. And this probably goes into like kind of purpose, but I started off with my own family and own kids. And then along the way, I realized like, wow, this is making a huge difference, not only in my own life, but in my kids' lives, in my spouse's life, my husband's life, in my stepkids who live with me, in my relationship with my son, who is, living in another country. It's starting to change, like all of our dynamic. And other families need to know this as well. Like I could hold all this information for myself, but number one, I talk more about it, maybe later in our other questions, but starting to do my own healing work, I realized that so much of the things I was now having to learn as an adult, I had never learned it as a child. Nobody had taught it
Mm.
to me as a child. So I was like, somebody needs to teach kids this, like, so they don't have to become a 30-year-old adult and then go to therapy to learn this stuff. Why isn't someone teaching it to them now? So the second thing I think was parents need to learn this as well. Like, I'm a parent myself, and if I knew what I learned and what I know now, I would have avoided so many of the issues that I had with my kids and power struggles and, hurting our relationship and our connection. And so I'm like, number one, kids need to learn these skills because they're young and obviously it's going to help them in their adult life. And number two, for the parents that are already adults, they can learn skills as well, but also many of them, and what I was seeing in my own therapy work was, wow, all of these patterns, unhelpful patterns, started as a child. And
Mm.
obviously, I can't go back and change the past, but what I can do now is learn to reparent myself and give myself those things that I never had as a child. So it's
Mhm.
basically it's going back and healing your inner child. So in a way, I say, I'm a kids and teen life coach, but I also work with parents. But the part I'm working with the parents is their inner child. So really, I am still a kids and teen life coach. I'm working with their inner child. So yeah, that's something that kind of made me do the switch of I could go back and work in schools, and I do work in a school now. I'm a substitute teacher, but I also use it as a platform to, like, I know I could go in and teach you math and English and science, but there are plenty of other teachers who can do that. My gift is, and what I can offer that other people maybe don't, which you talk about at the end, is taking this mental health approach and teaching them
Mm.
these skills of self-regulation, emotional intelligence, communication skills, setting boundaries, setting goals for themselves, positive thinking and all these things. So I'm like, I'm a teacher, but I'm also, and teaching, I guess, is more like, this is the way it's done. Coaching is having conversations with the kids and basically guiding them and helping empower them and saying, actually, you have the answers in yourself. Like, if you really um, go, deep down, and my job as a coach is to ask the right questions,
Mm.
then it helps these kids go, oh, wow, I kind of already knew that.
Mhm.
because inside I do believe, and that as a coach we believe that kids are good inside and they want to succeed, and they just struggle with all the outside messaging and their own low self-esteem, and that when you can get around that and get to the core of who they really are like these amazing creatures that have like all this baggage on them put. So the earlier you can get to them, they don't have as much baggage, right? And
Right.
so that is helping that part shine before they have all that baggage put on top.
Mm.
That's normally what you see in the teenagers. Like they already have so
Mhm.
much of that, those coverings of the world and the messaging they receive. And so you kind of have to take that off and rewire. Whereas when you work with kindergartners, everything is so fresh and new to them.
Right.
So
Right.
it's really beautiful.
Yes. Oh. That is very true what you're saying. If you start earlier, like I'm thinking about my little girl at 3, she's learning these things about, her feelings and emotions and emotional, what is it, emotional literacy, just having the vocabulary and the language for this is how I'm feeling, and then how to voice that. And like you said, we didn't learn these things growing up. It just simply it wasn't a thing. It wasn't taught. But it's not like it doesn't exist. We still, in our age, we still have to learn what they are. So the younger you can learn that, and the quicker you can, get to the kids, so to speak, then you can really start helping them to be their own advocates, helping them to, just have a better understanding and knowledge and self-awareness of who they are, and that lasts them for life, and that's going to shine through with everything else that they do, whether it's academics, whether it's their relationships, whether it's what career they're going to choose. It's just it's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, so the next question is, um, can you define what calling or purpose is for you, and what is its significance for you?
Hmm. Ah, I was I talked a lot about this with my therapist about like obviously, for our earlier episodes when we talk about how we grew up and just the absurdity of the environments that we lived in and all the beliefs we had put on us. And then, I we haven't really talked about like later on in our kind of like after we left the cult, but also during my teen years and during my 20s, just like I went through so many negative experiences, like really painful, hard experiences. And I'm like in my 30s now. Why did I go through all that? Obviously, like if I knew some of these skills, then I probably wouldn't have gone through that. I would have avoided those situations, or I wouldn't have put myself in there. Or if I was in there, I would have not known how to get out and known how to advocate for myself. So, kind of like, where was the adults to teach me these things when I was a kid? So I shouldn't have had to go through those things. But now that I have, and we talk about like pain through purpose or purpose through pain. Um, And I realized like I kind of had to go through all of this stuff because without it, I wouldn't be the person that I am right now. I wouldn't have chosen to do the work that I do right now because I wouldn't have, maybe I would have, I don't know, life is funny like that. But I got to a point where I was in so much pain emotionally and psychologically from the situations I was in with my family and my own kids. And just like, I need help here. Who's there who can teach me these things? And obviously I had to teach myself. And I, obviously had wonderful mentors over the years. But now I realize like I can pinpoint so many of these experiences and things that have happened in my life that have left this negative imprint on me. And if I go back in time and say, wow, this is the first time it started. We talk about like my therapist, a Gestalt therapist, like this is the first time it happened. This is where the imprint was left. And if I can help some child, maybe not the first imprint, but maybe it hasn't repeated itself over 30 years. If I can catch it when it's at the first year or the second year or the third year, then then I can probably change the course of their life, right?
Mm.
And that to me is like such an amazing, um, first of all, like I wish someone had done that for me. And that's a huge part of my purpose of if I can change one child's life to take a
Mm.
different trajectory, and they don't have to go through all that pain. They don't have to make all those mistakes. Number one,
Mm.
even if they do, it can still turn into some purpose for them. But if they can also avoid it and go on to do something else with their life, and one of the things during COVID, I think I was hearing like so many kids and so many teenagers were committing suicide or attempting suicide because there was just nobody, they were in so much pain and there was nobody there to talk to. They were all isolated. And obviously, the situation of being in isolation would really exacerbate any issues they had inside. So I was like, I can't just focus on the education and the maths and the language and all that stuff. Like, I need to approach things in a different way and really speak to the emotional side of things that kids are going through and that parents lack these skills, so they're not really having these conversations with their kids. You
Mm.
can go see a child therapist or a psychologist, but I know the wait lines are huge for that very reason because there's not enough people doing this kind of work.
Mhm.
And I talk a little bit about um, also the style I do things in, that I don't just take a brain based approach of everything's in your mind, just think positive thoughts. And I'm not just like, oh, just feel your feelings and that's all that matters, because either one of those approaches kind of lacks a balance. And that's kind of what I've seen in a lot of kids. Either they take one approach or the other, and they're always finding there's something missing.
Yeah.
So through my personal experiences, I've like, this is what's worked for me. This is what's worked for my own family. This is what's worked for the kids I have worked with. And so it means it's going to work for other families. It's going to work for a greater population of kids and teens.
Right. Right. Wow. As you're talking there about how you came to that moment where if I can even change the trajectory of one child's life, if I can stop, this negative pattern or imprinting from repeating itself so that, they don't have to be that 30-year-old who's in so much emotional pain. I was really moved and touched. And I was reminded of this quote that I recently heard. I'm not sure who said it first, but it goes, um, calling isn't what you do. Calling is what happens inside others when you do what you do. So I saw that quote, or I read it somewhere, and I was like, wow, that's really amazing because it shifts the focus off of, what am I supposed to do and am I doing it right? Or what if I don't do it the right way? And it's just you do what you do, and the changes are going to happen in other people's lives in some sort of magical way. It's not magic, but really that is what calling is when lives are changed because you step into that place where you're like, yes, I'm going to do what I'm called to do. So yeah, I was reminded of that as you were sharing that part of your story. That is so beautiful. And I think that's really a teacher's heart because you realize that even if you change one child's life, even by, whatever it is you're teaching them academically, if you spend a little time to just sit with them and talk with them or just notice that they're there, that can make such a huge difference in a child's life, especially the children who are having a rough time at home, who maybe aren't seen, who maybe are, like you said, they've got that emotional baggage or the layers and the layers. And when you can, I guess, as a teacher or as someone who's done your own work, you can then kind of see the kids who are really struggling and who may end up needing to do a lot of work. You can kind of like almost hone in or zoom into that child or that kid and say, hey, I see you. I'm here for you. And that's what you're doing. You've done it with your own kids, your own family, but then kind of extending that serving to offer more to more kids. That's
Yeah.
really beautiful. Mm.
It's really interesting. It's and that's one of the reasons I do enjoy working in the schools. And I'm like, yeah, yes, it's testing my teacher skills as well because I'm going all the way up to eighth grade here. I'm like, I was used to teaching the younger ones, but it is just being in an environment where there's kids and you'll hear little comments being made of, oh, I'm stupid. Oh, I can't do this. Like, oh, some relational stuff going on or some friendship stuff going on. Lunchtime and recess time, that's where I have my best conversations with kids because,
Mhm.
it's outside the classroom, but they're still there with all their peers. They're usually taking baggage that happened in the classroom and like, oh, I'm so stupid. I'm really bad at math. I'm just not good, right? And we talk about different kinds of intelligences, like what kind of intelligences you have. Like it's not just in math and science and language. there's creativity, there's kinesthetic. Your body is really good at doing sports, and they're like, so just almost planting seeds, and
Mm.
kids having, crying in the playground because their friend won't play with them. You go over and talk to them and talk about attachment styles. And some people need time and space. Other people want to go and fix it right away,
Mhm.
and helping them understand the dynamics. And this is for me, that's coaching. I had this idea that coaching was one-on-one in your office, talking about things like kind of like therapies, but also in a coaching style of the one-to-one, right? It's you go deep. And so when I went to school and I was like, this doesn't feel like coaching. I'm kind of just a teacher. And then I realized like this is planting seeds. Not everybody is willing to jump into your office and have an hour deep conversation and transformational experience with you. But for children, it's being there with them throughout the day and catching them at that moment where they're really struggling and just offering a few words of encouragement. And this is what I talk about, that back 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have coaches. We had the grandma, we had the janitor at the school who offered that kind word. We had the aunt who saw them, sad, sitting on the sofa and had a couple words with them. That's all coaching was. And
Mhm.
so now just being able to catch them at those moments and offer them that support and being seen and that validation, and then some tools on how to work out the situation. That for me, I'm like, that's ideal. That's exactly what it is. So
Mhm.
I
Oh,
love
that's
doing that.
beautiful. How coaching for you has not just, gone from a certain setting, but you've taken that approach, that philosophy, that lifestyle, and then you're now applying it in a completely different setting. And you're right. I think you're so right when you say it's about catching them in the moment. Because if you miss that moment, it's about timing is everything, right? So if you catch them in the moment and you see and you're like, aha, we're going to respond to it right here, right now, that for kids makes such a huge difference. But I think it was one thing that you told me is that sometimes you notice that you're the one to kind of be with the kids during their recesses or during their lunches. And during that time, there aren't a lot of other grown-ups. And of course, grown-ups and teachers, they need to have their off time because it's a very demanding job. You're constantly just giving, giving, giving. But in those moments where you do catch the kids, and that's where so much of the work is going to be done. And if you're not there, it's kind of, it's a missed opportunity. So it's about being very much in the moment, present, and then being able to respond when you see the need.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Okay, the next question is, okay, so could you explain to us about the coaching offerings that you have put together and that you are offering to either kids individually, one-on-one, or with groups or with parents? Just let us know a bit more about that.
Yeah. So I started off, like I said, thinking that it was going to be, uh, if you're in the coaching world or anything, like the one-to-one clients, and I'm working with individual families, and that's kind of how I started off. And then I realized, like, for a lot of families, but the idea of, there is stigma around my kid needs support, my kid needs help, or, oh, they have some problem, they've got anxiety, or they have, whatever, ADHD, or whatever parents come to me for. That actually, a lot of the coaching work can be done just through more of a casual setting. And it's about being present in that environment the kids are in. And so I've come to kind of adjust my different offers. I still offer, which is kind of my, I think premium offer is the one-to-one. Either I work directly with the kids by themselves, or I work with the entire family if the parents also want to work with me. And I often find that works best because we're changing an entire family system. Now, some parents are like, I'm really busy. Listen, my kid just needs a little bit of support. Work with them for 3 months on, some goal setting or some anxiety management or something like that. And I'll work with them one-to-one. But then I also know that sometimes kids want a more of a group setting, where they chat and they talk about their own personal experiences. And it's almost like a support group in a way for kids, which sounds really strange, but that's what it feels like. So I offer an after school program, and right now it's in person. I also offer online, but it is a little bit different with the kids, all the different ages and the different timings. But I offer both in person and online support groups for kids from The youngest I've worked at that age group is 7,
Mm.
7 to about 15, 16 years old. And we right now I have a small group of girls that I work with, and so we it's very tailor made to them. We talk about stuff coming up in school, so social issues, gossip, rumors, when you have your first crush on a boy, and all this kind of stuff that comes up. Just it's very practical in what's coming up in their everyday life, and we talk about that. Like, hey, tell me about your week and what's going on. And oh, this is what happened. How do you feel about that? So we learn. We incorporate a lot of the stuff that I do in my one-to-one coaching, but it's more on a daily basis kind of setting. It's not like we're not delving deep into anything like I do more in my one-to-one sessions.
Mm.
And then I offer a lot of training for parents actually, because I do believe that as parents, we go first. It's really great that we can teach our kids this, but if they go home to a parent or parents that are dysregulated and they're yelling or all this stuff, they're like, they've told me, it's great that I'm learning all this stuff with you, Miss Victoria, but then I go home and my parents don't do any of this. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of tough, right? And so I understand that both from my own experience with my kids that I needed to change as a parent and learn these tools and understand what's going on with my kids, developmentally. So I teach parents a lot of kind of psychoeducational courses, and I put them on YouTube, different trainings
Mm.
about self-regulation, what goes on in the brain when kids are dysregulated, a lot of things for teachers as well, how to understand what's going on in school with their students and like the different levels of dysregulation and how they can bring them back to, be able to teach a class more coherently. And so, yeah, I offer free trainings on YouTube for parents and educators. I also offer short videos on TikTok for kids. Again, these kind of emotional intelligence skills. Um, and right now I'm working on a series of online webinars for parents and educators.
Mm.
There's free stuff for parents, kids, and educators. There's the webinars, which are more kind of like probably 12-week trainings. And then there is my one-to-one kind of more in-depth coaching for families and kids.
Mm. Wow, that's incredible. So much that you're offering. And do you find that after kids start working with you, is it easy for them to implement what you're teaching with them, like in the settings with you, but then you're saying going back to their family? What makes it, let's say, effective for a child to be able to apply the stuff? And then what makes it kind of challenging for them where they're not really able to? What are some of the like challenges that you found in this line of work?
So a big thing that I teach kids is the locus of control, right? Circles of control.
Mm.
So we can't control whether or not our mom speaks to us kindly, but we can control how we respond to that. We can control how to set boundaries with others. So I teach them these skills, and then they often share with me, it's really tough to do this
Mm.
either at home where other people aren't doing it, or I'm not in an environment where I can feel like I can say these things safely. And that's where I'm like, yeah, that's why working with the parents is really important. But also teaching the kids that you can't control what goes on in school, in your family, anywhere else. What you can control is yourself. And I also teach them that, hey, you know what? I'm not expecting you to go away and get this, is not a test. You've got the rest of your life to practice these skills. I am simply planting seeds. We're simply giving you the knowledge. It's a gift, and you get to use it throughout your lifetime, however you want, right? It's not a test and you go home and you get 100% on it. No, that's not the purpose of this. The purpose is to simply take this, reflect on it, and as you get older, you're going to also understand it in a different way, right? You're going to understand that's what maturity is, understanding, oh, things aren't as black and white as I thought they were when I was 4 or 5 years old. Things are a little bit more nuanced. And then this is where we start to learn self-compassion and compassion for others. Um, and so what I find is that when the kids do share with me, hey, it's kind of tough to use these. Either, oh, I forgot to use, yeah, I know what to do,
Mhm.
but I forgot to use it. I'm like, yeah. And so that's why this takes practice, right? You know what to do, but your brain also in the moment that had the idea, oh, I know this stuff to do, that part of your brain is actually working. So this is where I teach them somatic tools. Like it's not the goal to get 100% and to do it 100% all the time. It's to catch yourself and be like, oh, I realize I'm feeling this now. And maybe you still, the behavior you do isn't exactly the right thing, but at least you were aware of it, and that in itself
Yes.
progress, right? And so it's teaching
Wow.
them. I have this thing: progress, not perfection. It's not about, practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes you better, and the more you practice, the more you get
Mm.
better. And
Yes.
so teaching them that, number one, to be compassionate on yourself, that you don't have to get it perfect. You've
Mm.
got I always tell them, you've got the rest of your life to practice this, and you're going to get better. I said, I only learned this kind of stuff 5 years ago myself.
Oh.
Still struggle with it. And I let them know, I'm like, I still struggle with staying constant,
Oh.
but it's catching myself. And you're going to get better at this. As your brain gets more developed, you're going to get better at this. And
Mm.
number two, yeah, you're going to be in environments where other people don't do this. And you're going to notice, oh, other people don't do that. But also use that as a reminder of, hey, my mom and dad never learned these things. And that's why my mom has these huge meltdowns and my dad yells and throws things, right? This is almost an example of what happens when you don't learn these things. And this is
Mm.
why it's important to learn these things as kids. Because when you're a parent, this is why I may work with your mom and dad, but it's going to take them longer because their brain already has these patterns. This is why I'm working with you now, because you can
Mm.
start these patterns from an early age and you don't have to learn something, unlearn it, and then learn something new. And they're like, oh,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah,
I love the fact that you have these conversations with them and you spell it out black and white and step by step. And it almost, I know it's not scripted, it isn't systematic, but it feels that way, which is, it's easy enough to follow. I mean, simple, maybe not easy, but it's simple, it's
simple,
like we're
yes.
doing this because this, and so this, and if not, and if you're having those conversations and you're talking it out with them, they can get it. They understand kids are smart. And I think for them, probably, I mean, if I were a child and, in their shoes and I had a grown up spelling it out to me really simply and straightforwardly and giving me the examples. And then even the example that you use of yourself, which is, I'm learning this stuff too. It's all really down to earth. There's a lot of humanity. You're not trying to reach for this high, unreachable goal. All of that, everything you just said is just, I mean, I don't know why every parent wouldn't want to like rush their kids over to you right away and be like, just just take my kid because I mean, that's so beautiful. And there's so much heart in there. And I could see kids just growing and benefiting and just like flourishing under your under your coaching. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And the ones that I have worked with over a certain period of time, I have
Mm.
seen them and like, oh, Miss Victoria,
Mm.
I was able to do this. And they're so proud of themselves. And of course, we also have the conversations of when this happened, I wasn't able to do this. And I was like, yeah, I know, right? It's tough. But look, when you are able to do this, didn't it? Like, what was the result? Oh, then this happened. That was so much better, right? Yeah. So you see the benefit of that. And then you also see I could have done better here. But that's the whole purpose of coaching. It's not to be perfect. We're going to keep learning these things throughout our lifetime. And yeah, it's going to be tough. And most of the time, you're going to forget. But as you get older and you keep practicing, you're going to get better. And then pretty soon, 80% of the time, you will do it. And 20% of the time, you won't. And that's the times you offer yourself self compassion just because you understand that other people aren't perfect all the time as well, just like you.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That learning journey is just it's just beautiful to see.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so I just have a couple more questions. If you were to take, let's say, 3 to 5 top tips, let's just say three, it's easier to work with, 3 top tips for parents who are considering coaching or trying to understand more about coaching, what would you share with them? The 3 top things you'd like them to know.
One of the questions I still get is like, oh, coaching's like therapy, right? And I'm like, yes and no. In the kind of the support you get, and you're working with one person, and we're talking about life experiences that happen, and you're learning tools. Yes, but in terms of, and this is one of the things I'm so proud about in my work, is that I do believe because I have studied counseling and I have done CBT and I have done NLP and lots of other different more therapeutic style modalities that I understand that a lot of the work they do there is to do with the past, right? It's old stories, trauma that's happened in the past, talking about past experiences. And coaching seems very much to be okay, I understand you have stuff that's gone on in your past, but let's talk about the future. Let's go forward, right? And I because I've learned from kind of almost both styles in both schools, that I was like, well, talking about the past is helpful sometimes, because when I started off with coaching, it was let's just think about the future. Who cares about what happened in the past? Let's go forward. And for a lot of kids, young kids, they're like, okay, great. But then they inevitably get stuck on something. And it's
Mm,
something that's happened in their life that's produced a story that they feel stuck in, that they can't move forward. Right. And so I was like, okay, so this is kind of where more therapeutic modalities and talking about things that happened in the past and kind of healing that trauma, that's where that's important. But at the same time, I don't want to get stuck in the past, because then we
mm,
just are all in our feelings and we never move forward. So, what is the balance? And in some of the more recent work I'm doing, I realize that there is this real balance. And one of the guys who I do a lot of, I take a lot of his courses, he calls it therapeutic coaching, right? So it is not completely discarding all the stuff that happened in the past and only looking towards the future, because the past informs our present. But it's
mm,
also being like, yes, let's all get cushy with our feelings and feel all these things. And we totally, and some of the kids who worked with therapists in the past, they said it was great. I worked with them for 3 years and I kind of came away with no tools. I went in, I talked with them, I maybe felt better about the thing that happened, but then the thing happened again in the future, and then I was back to the same place. And
mm,
they made me feel good in the process, and we talked about those things, but they didn't really give me any tools to, if that thing happened again, how could I, change the way I think, or how could I handle it in a way that would stop me from repeating that situation. So I didn't really learn any practical tools. I just felt better from talking. And
mm,
so I realized, like, oh, there's a balance there. So coaching, or the work I do, isn't therapy. It's, we don't all stay in the past. I give the kids a lot of um, practical tools that they can use. But at the same time, we do talk about what happened. We validate what happened, but
mm,
tell them, you know what? Sometimes getting stuck in these past stories, we get stuck and we just feel there's no way out. And so I'm going to talk about this. We're going to validate. We're going to process some of those things. And that's where I do a lot of body work, somatic work, to kind of
mm.
process trauma. And for kids, it's a little, it does live in the body, but it's a little more simple than, again, most of the kids I work with. Some are a little bit more, it's a little bit deeper, a little bit more traumatic for them. But for the majority of the kids I work with, it's like, you know, maybe my parents got divorced, or my friend doesn't like me at school, or I got gossiped about, or I'm not happy with the way I look. It's a little bit, we call it small t trauma. I know it's not supposed to be small t, but it's not as overt.
Mm.
So we do past work, we integrate some of that stuff, but then we also leave with, okay, so what tools do we need to go forward, and to if you encounter this experience again, what can you use? What tools can you use so you get a
Mm.
different outcome? And so
Right.
that's work I do. It's a balance of past, present, and future.
No, that would answer the parents' questions. Isn't coaching therapy? So you're kind of like bringing it together and integrating it in your personal approach, where you're understanding that the past informs the present, validating that, understanding that, helping the child to process or work through any, unresolved emotions, but then saying, and let's look towards the future. So it's very holistic, your approach is that you're not just looking at one aspect of it and kind of checking a box, but you're saying, what can I do to help this child as, a whole person, their past, their present, and their future. And I absolutely love and I'm a huge advocate of that approach because I think that that enhances well-being for the child and for the family. So yeah, kudos to that. Okay,
Yeah.
so therapy, coaching. What would be another two things that you would like parents to know?
While I can work with your child, the best results I get are with parents who decide to work with me as well. Because we talk about a family system. The child doesn't exist by themselves, right? So I can, I'm working with them 1 hour a week, maybe. The rest of the time they're going to school, which has its own, drama and maybe unhealthy messaging. And then the rest of the time they're at home. So if you just even do the math, 1 hour versus however many other hours in the week, if they're going, and we already know school and peers and teachers and educational system and all that messaging, it sends a lot of negative messaging because you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not the same as everybody else, whatever. So they're already getting negative messaging there. And then they go home and then it's like, I don't feel loved, I don't feel heard, I don't feel validated. My parents don't understand me, they're too busy for me. And great, they can work with me for 1 hour to kind of process some of those things, but that's not, that's not where the majority of the work is done. I plant the seeds, and they need to go back to at least a home where they feel understood, they feel seen, they feel heard. They feel they can go talk to their parents. And a lot of this work I do is, I always tell the parents, you are the leaders of your home. You create the environment. Thermostat, not a thermometer, right? You create the environment of your home. If they go back, I talk about like gardening here. You don't take the flower that's growing and put it out in the sunshine 1 hour of the week, and then the rest of the time you put it back in a dark closet somewhere, right? How do you expect the plant to grow?
Mm.
It's And also, I find a lot of resistance, especially from older kids, that, well, it's great, I'm learning this, but my parents aren't learning it, so why do I have to do it? Right? They understand the value of it, but they're like, I'm not going to be the only one in my home who's doing this. And I've even heard from some kids, like, I have to be the mature one in the home. I have to be the parent. Like
Mm.
these skills that I'm learning, I understand how they work and I know why they're good. But when I go back to my home, I have to teach my parents. I've got to take the more mature role in a situation where my parents are melting down and I have to be the mature one. And that for me is
Wow.
so sad. I'm like, yeah, that's not right. And first of all, you can be an example, but the parent should be the example, right? So I can do work with your child. However, the most lasting and effective and I always forget this word, kind of reinforced,
Sustainable?
sustainable. Maybe that's the word I'm
Yeah.
looking for. Sustainable work I'm going to be able to do is when I'm working with the whole family system, and it
Right.
doesn't have to be the whole family, right? I mean, the more people, the better. But the child and at least one parent. I usually encourage the mom, right?
Mhm.
At least so when the child goes back to the home, there is support there. There's somebody else they could be having these conversations with.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I would say that that's the second one. The most
Okay.
sustainable work I'm going to be able to do is when I'm working with a
Parent and
parent.
child together.
It's a team. Yeah.
Mm. Yes. And the
Yeah.
child feels a sense of congruency in that way as
Do.
well.
And,
And
and they feel they're not doing it by themselves. It's like, oh,
yes,
they're doing well. And almost the parent feeds off the child feeds off the parent because you're like, we're both working on this together. And they get
yes,
really excited about it. Yeah.
yes, absolutely. There would be a synergy there where you're growing together, you're learning together. And at the same time, I feel as a child, they would feel valued, like, okay, well, my parents are willing to not just sign me up for this new life change, but they're willing to, invest and buckle down as well. And that would make a child feel like, wow, they really see me there. I'm valuable to them. I'm important to them. Yeah.
They're
Wow.
willing to because of me because they want to have a better relationship. Yeah.
Yes. Mm. Okay, and so one final top tip.
Ah, I would say, oh, it's something I just watched last night. I've heard this before, but it was I think Lewis Howes, who's he does like the School of Greatness podcast, and he was talking about how he was talking to like some neuroscientists and some PhD doctors or something like that, and he said, what is the most important brain skill or something that people can learn? And both of them said emotional regulation, understanding your emotions and emotional regulation, because that is at the core of everything. Without that, was one of the things I teach the kids, and I showed them the slide full of all these famous celebrities. We have Travis Kelsey, we have Mike Tyson, we have Will Smith, all these ones are like, oh, I know that. I'm like, uh-huh. You can be whoever you want in the world. You can make millions of dollars. You can have everybody think you're amazing. And in a second, you can lose that because you don't have emotional regulation, because your
Mhm.
emotion, your master, and you're not their master. You can lose everything that you fought for in your entire life in 1 second of emotional dysregulation because you can't focus.
Right.
Right. So,
Wow.
and so they're like, of course, they look up to celebrities and like, oh, I know Travis Kelsey. I know Will Smith. I'm like, uh huh. And,
Brings it home.
this happened in their lifetime, right? Look what happened. Look at how people turned on them because they showed one moment of emotion. And they're human. And I teach them that they're human. But when you're in the public eye, something like that can be huge for who you are, your career, the way people look at you, right?
Okay, so I've got the last question here, and it is, there are lots of coaches and counselors out there these days. What sets you apart from them, and why would parents choose to work with you?
Mm. It's kind of a little bit what I talked about earlier, that it's the approach I take. Um, that I see so much about brains, become a brain coach, coach children on brain this, brain this, brain this. And I'm like, I know from when I first started coaching, I was all like the brain, super powerful. Like I learned NLP and CBT, cognitive, everything. Your brain is mind over matter. And then I just realized, like, I took these very brain-based approaches with kids, like just minor, just think positive thoughts and everything. And I just saw some kids struggle with that so much. And then there was also a lot of guilt that came with it. Like, well, I know these things and I know I'm just supposed to think positive. I know I'm just supposed to tell my like positive affirmations to tell myself. And I don't feel that way. I tell myself these things and I do these things. And why can't I stop thinking negative thoughts? What's so hard for me to switch? And they just felt like failures. And I was like, no, 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 that's not what's supposed to happen. You're supposed to feel empowered by this. Not, I can't even like just one more thing I'm bad at. I'm like, oh man, this is like it's not it's not everything. Like there's definitely some validity to that, but I'm missing a big piece of the puzzle, especially when working with these kids. Because when I trained, I um, initially trained to work with adults, and then I was like, I had this real passion for working with kids, and I realized like, oh, preventative rather than wait until they have all this baggage already. And so that was very early on when I first started coaching. And then obviously I had certifications in child and teen coaching, which again, very different. So then I realized, like, okay, with kids, and then obviously learning brain science, I'm like, hang on, a child's brain isn't even developed until they're, well, the logical part of their brain where we're
Prefrontal
teaching all the
cortex.
skills, prefrontal cortex, it's not developed until the 25, 26. What? Why am I trying to say that the brain is all there is and that's the part you need to use? What about when they go completely offline and then they can't use that part of the brain? What then? And what about kids who already have negative stories and trauma? And I know it doesn't live in the brain. Yes, the stories do, but where does the trauma actually live? It lives in the body. And so then also, Leonard Cohen or Dr. Larry Cohen talks all about play. And I studied with Dr. Laura Markham. She's also very big on play and play-based strategies with kids and being playful as a parent. So I was like, okay, there's definitely some precedent for more of a play-based, body-based strategies that can be used with kids. And so that's where I started learning, like, okay, somatic work is really, and in my own therapy as well, I was doing a lot of somatic work for these traumas that I had as a child that lived in my body. So I was
Mm.
like, okay, no wonder playing games and music and art and dancing, all those things come into so much um they shine with kids, right? So I started taking that approach, like, okay, let's do all that stuff. And again, I saw that that worked as well. But then there was also some kids who anxiety were stuck in their heads, stuck in their heads. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
so it's a balance between the both. It's a balance between brain-based cognitive tools and somatic tools that kind of deal with any past hurt and trauma, but also when we teach them to go into their bodies, I feel, especially in the world today where kids are all in their heads, everything is phone and this and that, right? And so they lose a lot of touch with their body and simply bringing them back to body-based skills of deep breathing, mindful eating, being aware of what your bodies are doing. I
Mm.
find already that does so much of the work for me, right? Just
Wow.
getting them back to into their bodies. And so that is where I feel I differ from a lot of coaches. I know therapists do that. You have play-based therapists or ones that use clay and art and things like that. So because I'm a mixture of both, I teach them those practical strategies and cognitive skills and reframing things. But also, let's not just live up in our heads and think the brain controls everything. The body is a really important factor. And this is where we say, mindfulness, breathing, eating right, getting enough sleep, all the basics really,
Right.
but all are body-based tools. And a mixture
Mm,
of both that's where the balance lies. And that's where
mm,
really encourage kids to look at both. And usually there is a big deficit in one area,
mhm,
and usually I find it's in the body, being aware of what's going on in their body, interoception. Um, yeah, so I teach a mixture of both. And there may be other coaches out there who are doing that, but I haven't found any yet. And so that's where I feel I differ from a lot of the other coaches who are very cognitive based and they use a lot of those tools. And I use a lot of somatic work with with cognitive work as well.
mm.
Yeah, so it's a mixture of both.
Yeah, so your approach is very person-centered, child-centered. Like you will see them as a unique individual with their own set of skills, needs, desires, like you said, deficits, and almost like make a custom-made plan for who they are and what they need versus I have this approach, this is where my training or expertise lies, and so I'm going to kind of impose this on the child and then just kind of hope it works. Whereas it's very, it's very them oriented. You're seeing who they are, what they need, where they're coming from, and catering the plan to meet what their needs are. And that really will ultimately get the best outcome for them because it's based on who they uniquely are. Again, person-centered, holistic wellness, all of that. And that's a really revolutionary approach, and not in the sense that we understand that we are holistic beings and that, we have different dimensions of wellness. But I think sometimes it may be a little bit easier to just focus on one, go in depth into one area, and then just say, I'm an expert on this. And that's fine as well. That's good. But if you're really looking for, let's say, it's an investment as well, coaching. Not everyone is able to do it. If you are going to do it, you're putting time, energy, money, a lot of resources into helping your child. You really want the best for them, from each session, but then also in the long run. And there's no better way to do that than putting them at the center of, their change and their growth. And I would, absolutely love that approach because it's based on who they are and what they need versus, a certain approach or modality that you have framework in your own mind. So that
That's what
is,
I found like that one size fits all program. That's why I started out with. And I was like, some kids fit right in there. Other kids are like, have a toe in there, and the rest
mm,
they're so different, especially when I'm working with neurodivergent kids. And I was like, when we teach them these really neurotypical frameworks, and they're just like, huh? But I can't
yeah.
do that. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but this is the program I was taught, right? But
Oh,
it didn't
wow.
make sense to me. So that's why, and that is one of the things I do feel it sets me apart from a lot of the other coaches is that the more I learn, the more I'm like, wow, there are so many modalities out there, so many approaches, and talking about like primitive retained reflexes and things like that, and that
Mm,
body base. A lot of kids who present with ADHD symptoms actually have retained reflexes, and so working on that with them. Simple exercises like yoga actually help incorporate some of those. So I'm like, there's so much out there. It would be so silly to just take one approach. Like, hey, let's think positive thoughts and do positive affirmations and that's all, because they're like, what about all this other stuff? And
right.
so it's helped me because of course I have this interest in learning myself, but also a lot of the stuff that I learn, I'm like, yeah, this is where it fits into
Mm,
the program I'm doing here, and this is where it works. And so it's been it's been a kind of incentive for me to learn more, but also everything that I learn, I'm like, yeah, this is where it fits into this little missing
mm,
puzzle piece. This is where it goes, right? So
mm.
yeah, I'm constantly learning. I'm always like on 3 or 4 courses at any one time. I'm like, oh, this is
Yeah,
so interesting. I was like,
yeah.
stop buying courses. I'm like, but it's so interesting.
Well, it's that growth mindset. And
Yeah.
that I think also really sets you apart because if you, as a coach, you're pushing yourself, you're learning more, you're like saying, what are better ways that I can serve, serve these kids and serve these families? Many people have been like, I've learned I can, make a course or, put out an offering and that's all. It kind of their learning stops. But in your line of work, it's like, there's the kids have so many needs, families have so many needs, you're also growing with them so that you can provide better for them or the best for them. And that's a beautiful, I think, approach to take, and also like a philosophy as a life coach, resilience coach for these families. So it really does set you apart. Yeah. Thank you
I think
so
so.
much, Victoria, for sharing your story, your passion, your work, everything that you've been learning in these past years, your own challenges and story, from whence you came to where you are now, and how you've let that lead you into your calling and purpose in life. And I will be putting Victoria's website and any other information from her into the comments so you can check her out. And yes, I mean, just the help. I'm going to put a little personal plug here, but the help that Victoria, as my sister, has given to me, both in my personal life and then also as a mom and then also as a stepmom, it has just been invaluable. I mean, like I would have had to pay thousands and thousands of dollars, but not just, the financial aspect of it, but just, you know, another woman, another mother, a sister, someone who is really, has gone through these journeys and battles and has these pain points herself. And she's taken that and now she's able to speak from a place of knowledge, of expertise, of personal experience, also a lot of empathy, a lot of heart. There's so much heart in everything that Victoria does. And I think that that's something that really sets her apart. And yeah, so if you have a child or a teenager, or even as a mom or father, if you're struggling or you just want a little bit more for yourself, then absolutely 100% look her up because that will be the best investment you ever make. If you can't, just have a resilience life coach as your sister. I mean, that's really the best way to go, but not everyone can do that. So that's your second best bet. Yeah. Yeah, so grateful to have you guys with us here today. I really loved today's episode, and I hope that you